All right, so thank you for joining us today, Grant. For our listeners out there, we have Grant Steen, who is a strength and conditioning coach with the Seattle Seahawks. Grant was a former Iowa Hawkeye football player, and the cross path there is how he and I met. So, Grant, for those that don't know who you are or where you're at in your journey as a strength and conditioning coach, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thanks for having me on, Justin. I've caught some episodes in the past. I think the site is a great resource. I use it a ton. So kudos to you guys on that end. But yep, my name's Grant Steen. I grew up in Emmitsburg, Iowa, which is your typical farming Iowa town. My dad is a retired high school coach and teacher, so I'm a coach's kid. So that's kind of my background there, where I grew up. Played at Iowa. I was a walk-on at Iowa from started there in 1999 to 2003. So, I've coached some Iowa Hawkeye players now, and they told me I'm old, but I still can, push them around a little bit in my head.
You have Noah and Blyther on there, right?
Yep. So 2 Hawkeyes. So it's always fun I try to make a point to seek out the Hawkeyes on other teams or coaches. So it's cool to create that. Another sidebar that, the Iowa program has an amazing, they call it the legacy program. It's just their alumni network. So they do a great job of connecting guys that way. But spent my time in Iowa as an outside linebacker from, like I said, 99 to 03. Bounced around a little bit trying to keep playing after college with the Patriots a couple times. They put me to NFL Europe, played in Canada, and finished up playing arena football, and knew I always wanted to coach. Just kind of didn't really know if I wanted to be a strength coach, if I wanted to be a football coach. And the first opportunity for me that came up was to be actually I was a high school strength and conditioning coach and a football coach in Phoenix, Arizona.
Oh, wow.
At a school called Brophy High School, which is an all boys school, really good program. Had a great strength and conditioning program. Led by a coach named Gary Gallant. He's not there. A lot of those coaches have kind of gone other places, but they had a great high school program. And then I ended up at the University of Hawaii as a grad assistant. And that would have been in 2009 when I started there. Was a grad assistant for a year before being hired full time. Spent a total of 4 years at Hawaii. My wife and I loved it there. We never dreamed of leaving. It's just kind of other opportunities come along to advance your career, and you have to make tough choices. And I've made quite a few of those along the way. And then I've made stops at University of Washington, USC, Stanford, worked at Exos in Pensacola, Florida, and then came up here to the Seahawks. So been doing this, really started coaching in 2007 at the high school level. And then, now in the NFL. So it's been a journey. It's been fun. You learn a ton along the way, not just with coaching, but in life when you live in different parts of the country, different people you're exposed to. And it's been fun.
There's a ton to unpack there, both as a coach, a father, and because there's the whole gambit of that. Let's start with your playing career, and again, Canada, Europe, and all of that. How have you been able to use that to your advantage, and having, like you said, the cup of coffee in the NFL? How have you used that to your advantage when talking to the players that you now work with in the NFL, of the importance of it to continue to stay into the league, and any advice that you give them?
Yeah, it definitely helps. It's sometimes hard to maybe bring up because you're talking to guys in the NFL and it's a little awkward, and you're like, oh, well, I played too. And a lot of places that I've worked, the coaches, do a great job of, introducing the staff and kind of giving their background. And then you just start to connect with the guys, as you're coaching. And we get such a great amount of turnover in the NFL that more times than not, you can connect the dots to someone of who you coached with or played with, and they know. So I try to do it that way. But the biggest thing is you just understand what they're going through. You understand the stress that they're going through, the routines they're going through, and it helps you with buy-in. That's a big, thing for me in my toolbox that I can use to create a relationship and create buy-in with guys that I understand what their body feels like. I understand, the off season process and the journey. So, I just use it, that way. And it is rare. Like, there's not a lot of former players that are strength coaches, and there's especially not a lot of former players that actually played, in the NFL that are coaching, especially strength coaches. So it's something that I try to use to my advantage, I guess.
So with your dad being a sport coach, and then, you said you knew you wanted to be a coach, and you even dabbled being a sport coach, what was kind of the tipping point that made you decide, you know what, I'm going to go down the rabbit hole of strength and conditioning rather than the technical tactical? Because you said you were exposed to both.
Yeah, so it's my high school. It was a really good high school. It's a smaller school and really prominent football and wrestling program. And the weight room, it's just part of the deal. It's never been a school where you don't train and there's no off season. You show up and play. Like, that's not part of the deal. So fortunately for me, my dad and other coaches, that's a part of the program. So I don't know anything different. And I fell in love with the process of training at a very young age, just being exposed to it and being interested in it. And quite honestly, it's the only way that I really made myself a player at Iowa is, maximizing what I had to get on the field. And, how I trained and how I approached things in the weight room helped me jump above a lot of guys as a player. So that part of it has always been there. I think, the more you get into this and ask questions, the big one for me, quite honestly, was lifestyle. I saw what the football coaches in college were doing, like the recruiting, the time away, unhealthy lifestyle. That mattered to me. I wanted to be able to kind of have the best of both worlds, and not everything's perfect. But for me, being a strength coach, I knew that I would be active. I'd be moving around. I'd get to coach all the players. I wouldn't be limited to a certain sector of guys. We don't have to travel for recruiting. In college, you are available quite often for a lot of those on campus things, but you're not leaving in the off season on a Monday and coming back Friday for recruiting and then doing it over and over and over. So that was kind of the big sell for me.
No, and that makes sense too, because it sounds a lot like what James Frazier said. I've had him on before, and Frazier, I worked with him from 11 to 12, and he's still at Harvard now, but I asked him a similar question, and he said, look, he wanted to be with his family. He didn't want to, be off recruiting. In that same vein, Hawaii, Washington, again, a lot on the West Coast, but there was a lot of moving. How difficult was that? And what piece of advice would you give to any of our listeners now about how to manage all of that moving while still wanting to, again, be present and be involved with the family?
Well, I mean, fortunately for me, my wife is an adventurer by nature. So, that one was easy for her. Like, we haven't really lived in places that are really, really awful, to be honest. So, there are some that aren't so great, and yes, it is tough. My wife's family's from Colorado. It is kind of tough being away from family, but neither one of our families ever really pressured us to be like, you need to move closer to home. Like, I knew from early on, like, I wanted to move away from small town Iowa, so that was part of it for me. And then, you meet people and opportunities come up, and trust me, there's opportunities that I've said like, yeah, no way. And they might've been, some people see it as a step up. For me, it was always just the right place and the right people, not necessarily the job title. So, the West Coast kind of fits my wife and I's lifestyle, like being in Hawaii and Southern California, and even when we coached at Stanford, being close to the ocean and being able to surf and fly different places easily. You kind of start to factor a lot of that in to, your life, I guess.
How different was it? I mean, you went pro, you were essentially in the Pac-12, then you went private, and then pro. So what was kind of the biggest things that helped you? Like, what were you able to take from one place? Okay, college, private, now professionally? What were kind of some of the big nuggets that helped you with those transitions? Because, you know, we have it with our members now that they're maybe not doing the exact trajectory college, private, pro, but they may be going from college to private or private to professional. We just had Cam Joss on, who he was a private sector over at in the East Coast with the Francos, and then now he's working in college. So what would kind of be some nuggets to help those people out?
I guess starting with the college sector, it's really being organized. You know,
In what way?
accounting for all contingencies. You know, you never want something to really blow up in your face, I guess. So like double checking things, being very thorough with your plan, going over the day-to-day athletes with the sports medicine staff, having a good rapport with the football ops person in football, just so that number one, you're organized with what you're going to do. And that's, that starts before you even start organizing a training plan, because there's a lot more moving parts on a campus than in an NFL setting or a private setting, I guess you could say.
Yeah, you don't have to worry about classes.
Yeah, classes, your schedule in the NFL is easy to work around. Like it's the only thing they have. So that part, for college, like getting organized really well, it will set you apart, because I think things can go really, really sideways on you really fast if you don't have a contingency plan for most every situation. An example at Hawaii was we didn't have an indoor facility. So it rains very frequently in Hawaii during the winter months when you're doing your winter off season. So
grass or field turf?
Field turf. So
even worse.
You can get away with some of the stuff, but if you run into a 6 a.m. Rainstorm, you got to have a contingency plan. So having a auxiliary gym booked every single day on the book, so that if something does happen, you have a place to go. So something like that would be beneficial. If you have a shared weight room, designating what teams train where when there's more than one team in the weight room, so it doesn't turn into, a free for all. I guess in the private sector, it's really about meeting the client's needs. You can't just run a general program for, let's say, a baseball off season. Guys are coming to, I worked at Exos, they're coming to Exos because the Exos has a great reputation, but you're not just rolling out a general program that kind of checks all the boxes. Like you're going to have to get very specific with some guys. And
How long were you there for at Exos?
I worked at Exos for just about 2 years. So,
and when did you have, was it always the same type of athletes? Was it like always football? What was the cycles?
So if you look at like the January 1 at an Exos facility for 8 weeks, you're going to be heavy combine.
Yep.
Then somewhere around mid-February, you get NFL offseason guys coming in. And then when combine ends, you're really, really ramping up NFL guys to leave to go to OTAs. And then at our facility in Florida, it was a very heavy tactical population that was there year round, and they just kind of rotated through. It's obviously different guys at different times doing different things, but the way that it was structured was 2 coaches were with combine the whole time. One coach would be with military during the winter. One coach would take the all professional athletes. And that's kind of the curveball about a private sector. I might be coaching a professional athlete group with football, baseball, rugby, and a soccer guy all in the same group. And some guys have been there for a month. Some are there day 1, some are 2 weeks in. So again, organization can really help you with kind of where you're at in your phases. You're almost coaching 4 groups in one. I would just divide them up at, if we're doing a dynamic warm up on a line, if we're doing a linear, speed session on the line, and hey, you guys are running this, you're doing this, and you're doing this, just based on where they're at with their time in the facility. So you get really good at kind of doing things on the fly, having a very good Rolodex of exercise selection and training process, and being very specific with meeting someone's needs, because ultimately they're paying money to come there to train versus a athlete who it's either A, part of their scholarship, or B, if they don't show up, they're going to get fined in the NFL and pro sector. So
How are you
that part
guys
of it,
tracking any KPIs, like you said, to keep them, you know?
yeah, yeah. So that's kind of the private sector. In the pro setting, I think most NFL coaches say the hardest thing is you don't see your guys from the end of the last game until the middle of April when the off season starts.
Wow.
And then you work with them for 9 weeks, 8 weeks, 9 weeks, depends on your coaching staff, and then they're gone for 5 weeks. So kind of those critical times of off season and preseason, they're not required to be there. And even in OTAs, NFL athletes, it is all voluntary except for mandatory minicamp. So you have to be very flexible and understand that guys will sometimes want to do some of their own things, and other times they are going to listen to what you want.
So as somebody that was working in the private sector and did have guys coming in during that time frame of the off season, how have you used that to your advantage when now working with the professional athletes and recommending? Do you just lean into it and say, hey, I recommend you to go here because they're going to be 80% similar? Or do you try to say, hey, I've been there, you like, don't waste your money, just come and train with us?
I think the biggest thing you can do is, and we have a checkout process at the end of the season. It's pretty standard. You try to educate them on where are you going to be, what goals do you have, and what resources do you have available? Like what are you willing to spend? The worst thing that I've seen that guys where they make a mistake is, I'm going to be here for 2 weeks, then I'm here for 2 weeks, I'm going on vacation, then I'll be back here for 3 weeks. Like, even if you have something that maybe we think is not the most optimal training, at least you get consistency if you stay at the same place, versus you're starting over every time you go somewhere new, or it's more like a just workout of the day type of atmosphere. You're not really training. You're just kind of, hey, I got to work out in, now I can do something else. And then we do get a small amount of guys, maybe 10 guys that stay around here all year. But the weather in Seattle during those months is not, what you want to be doing if you have opportunity to go somewhere else and be. So you just try to educate them. And I've created a good rapport with a lot of the well-known private facilities where you can give guys a heads up on injuries or goals or things like that. But at the end of the day, these guys are professional athletes, and they're going to seek out what they feel like they need to seek out, and you just try to educate them the best you can. And then ultimately, that you're going to have up to like 26 weeks in season if you go all the way to the Super Bowl, plus a good 8 weeks in-house in the spring, so that's 34 out of 52 weeks. So they do need time away to breathe. It helps you recharge.
You teed up my next question perfectly. Where I have some other friends, or we've spoken with our athletes at Iowa about, hey, how long the in season is going to be that rookie year.
Yeah.
From you playing a bowl game, then it's combine prep, then you go to the combine, then rookie mini, and then how much longer the actual in season is. Talk about the differences and again, not details and any, but like just from a 10,000 foot view, how different is an NFL in season design, knowing that you have that long of really uninterrupted, you maybe have a Monday, Sunday, Thursday, occasional Saturday game, but it's very long uninterrupted training. How does that paradigm shift in the NFL versus the college in-season training look like, from your opinion, from a 10,000 foot view?
You said it, like the number one thing, and this is just for any coach, when you're setting up a training plan, you got to know the schedule. So the first thing that I do when I program our in season is I look at our schedule. I need to know when the bye week is. I need to know when our Thursday night game is, when our Monday night game is. And then for us, since we're so far in the Northwest, any long travel to the East Coast or anything, I look at those. And then we have a real fun caveat this year. We play in Germany.
Ooh, really?
But then the next week is our
Next week's
bye
the
week.
bye.
Yeah.
And
So
are they going to at least do it for you guys where you leave from the East Coast to then?
so we play, I believe we play on the West Coast the week before. So we'll practice here up until like Wednesday morning and then leave.
So, because
So
doesn't the NFL try to do it in some cases where like an East Coast, like,
not
they'll try
necessarily.
really
Not
where like you
necessarily.
just stay on whatever coast for 2 games and knock it out?
That's all based on the team's preference.
Gotcha. Okay.
But we've never done any of that. We'd rather get back, do our thing, and then travel again.
But I
So
mean, you're talking about pure just reverse engineering, like
yeah,
looking at what you know is going to happen
yep,
and reverse engineer that.
yep. So once we get the schedule, then you can really kind of put together a plan. And it's very loose because things change so much from a Sunday afternoon to a Monday morning, training time. So you nothing's really written in ink, it's written in pencil. There's a general outline. And we basically go in like a 4-week, block of how we do things, and then they change. I don't want to get into too many specifics, but it's really not super crazy. We train twice a week. Older guys get a couple more choices on when those days are versus younger guys. But the biggest one is just knowing the schedule, things like that they really dictate, what you do. I would say the last third of the season, there's kind of for lack of a better term, like kind of a peaking more of your programming. It's way less volume. It's, things like that to keep guys twitchy, but not wear them out. The recovery and the sleep are immensely critical to these guys, especially for us with how far we travel for games, so it just later in the year becomes a lot more recovery and mobility and just a couple of big bang for your buck things. And then Friday guys will get a nice feel good lift in, and that's a big part of it, the mental part of them feeling like they're ready to go.
Yeah, and one of the things that I've heard from different coaches in college and in the pros talking about with respect to the recovery modalities, more professional teams having it in house versus in colleges, where you might have athletes that live far away, and that's why you guys have it in house rather than the college teams. They could kind of outsource it with a deal from other people. So that makes sense. What would be the difference in terms of the mindset that you've noticed, and then physically from that pro to amateur athlete, whether it was at Hawaii, Washington, USC, Stanford versus the pros that you saw at Exos in Seattle?
Can we pause for 1 second?
Yeah.
My computer is going to restart in 1 second.
Gotcha.
Sure.
All right, so JJ, you're gonna start playing it now. All right, so professional athletes versus amateur athletes. You work with amateurs at Washington, USC, Stanford, Hawaii, and then pros at Exos in Seattle. What would be the biggest difference, mindset and physically, that you would give, insights to our listeners and members?
The physical one's pretty easy. Like these guys are just genetic freaks. Like quite honestly, like there's some guys that they walk into the building and you're just like, are you kidding me? Like they walk into the weight room, they look at it and they walk out pumped. Like they don't even have to train to look good. But so physically, like a lot of these guys have God-given talent. And you mix in some sound training and they're going to keep making money and playing sports for a long time. But then there are a good amount of guys that they got to train hard. They got to be on top of their nutrition. They got to do all the things right just to have a chance to be there. From a mindset standpoint, like I've been fortunate to work with probably 2 guaranteed Hall of Famers here at Seattle, and they want to be great. Like they tell you, like, I want to be coached. Like if I'm not doing something that's going to help me, tell me. So that part of that mindset is they want to be great. I think some of the mindset is it's just inherent in competitors. They either got a chip on their shoulder, something happened in their life, their sports career, they were overlooked, they were told that, hey, this guy's better. For some guys, they see the other guys at their position across the league and they want to be better than them. They want to make more money. They want to play more, just all those little details, you see show up in the professional guys. College guys, I think some of it might be they're just young and they don't know how good they can be, or they don't know what it really takes to be an NFL football player. Like you have to be all in. If one area of your daily, routine or your lifestyle isn't there, you're just bringing your chances down of being a professional football player. You got a small window of time to make money playing football, and that's one of the things in my job to tell these guys, like, I'm going to try and help you stay on the field. It's up to you how you perform being on the field. I'm not the one telling you how to, read a pulling guard and things like that, but you just try to reiterate to them, like, taking care of yourself, getting everything as right as you can is what's going to help you stay on the field. And I think if I could think of one thing, maybe physically, that the biggest difference is it's the nutrition, the financial investment that these guys put into their food, into their, like you said, modalities. Like, it's real, and they'll ask, hey, what do you think about this and that, especially now, like, the information is so accessible. That's a big difference.
So how do you battle that, whether it be you already knew you had to battle, or quote unquote battle, but have any of the gurus that the guys that they go to, or people that they go to when they're away from you, now if they have that constant access to it via social media, and like you said, with nutrition, you have to know kind of all of the things that people might be asking you about. As a coach, how challenging and tiring can that be?
Tiring is a big one.
You must hear about diets that you're like, wait a minute, what is this?
Yeah. I think what you try to reiterate to them is you're a professional athlete. You're not just an everyday person. There's a big difference. Like, how you need to fuel yourself is way different than me. Like, I'm just trying to stay healthy and look good. I don't have to go out on the field and put in, this work. Like, it's way different.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that one is a big one, like helping anybody understand what you see. Okay, well, what is that person's goal? What are they doing versus what are you doing? And then a lot of it comes down to, it's just like fundamentals. The fundamentals of blocking and tackling are forever going to be the fundamentals of blocking and tackling, and the fundamentals of eating right, training right, are really not going to change.
How well does it help? And again, whether it's nutritionally or physically, when you have that athlete that says, hey, coach me, I want you to tell me if I'm doing something wrong. How important is it for that player's teammates to hear it? Does it, in your opinion, does it go in one ear and out the other, because just based on the individual, or, is it truly a case by case thing? Like, hearing it, I think, okay, yeah, that'd probably be great for that player's teammates to hear it, so you can try to put them on a pedestal and say, hey, look, like, be like Johnny over here, or Susie, look at how they want to be coached, and try to champion them. Is that something that you think can continue to happen in the professional world? Or again, just professionally, it's so different?
No, it can definitely happen. When you see the guys at the on each team, if you're a young guy kind of figuring things out, when you see the older established guys doing things the right way, that's the best way to get the message across of the coach. And a lot of it probably happens in the meeting rooms when corrections need to be made on film. Like, nobody's safe. Like, everyone's heard the stories about Tom Brady being called out in meetings. Now every coach does it a little different, but at the end of the day, you have to be able to have the confidence as a coach to address something if it's not going to help the person, whether it's in a training atmosphere, on a playing field atmosphere, and then the subtle details of coaching individuals is just something you pick up by working with the same guys for a long time, or being a coach for a long time. That's kind of how I approach it.
You talked about the physical freaks, and I know that there's always been the conversation around, in the NFL, people that they're busts, but they projected to be so great. Again, 10,000-foot view. Why do those guys that seem like they have all the physical attributes? Why is it that for them that they don't quite grasp it at that next highest level, in your opinion?
I mean, the physical part of any sport is only, one piece of the puzzle. There's a lot of great athletes that just have great instincts that can overcome, a deficiency in some area. And just because you're a physical freak, maybe you're not grasping the instinctual part of your position. Or maybe you have an injury history that you can't overcome. It's kind of hard to say, like, just because you can, run fast and you're big and, all those type of things doesn't guarantee that you're going to be, the top level player at your position. There's something to be said about experience, being savvy, just having, good feel for the game goes a long ways.
And talking about, being all in and needing to be all in all of those different areas, how can that be trained, in not just being niched to, college football strength coaches that are listening to this, but any of our members that have amateur athletes, in your opinion, how can that mindset be trained? And I think that's something that all of us in coaching are trying to figure out. How can we speed that process up? Like, throughout your experience and anytime you've detached to try to figure it out, what in your brain would be the advice that you would try to give to those kids or coaches to try to speed that up?
I think for me, it's just creating a routine. You're going to have a routine for when you wake up, what you do to go to school, how to get ready for practice, training, all those things. So I think if you can cut out the guesswork, having a routine dialed in and something that works for you, could be something that might, like you say, speed things up for them.
How, being the devil's advocate, hearing that made me think about the Curtis Martin, I think it was the Football Life, where he talked about, Parcells told him, like, oh, don't mistake routine for success. So, the double-edged sword of that, like, how would you remind people, or, caveat that of, making sure you're not just kind of going through the motions with it? Because I agree with you that you need to have discipline and routine. But, I feel like even myself, I want to make sure that I don't just fall into that, the lull.
Yeah. I mean, it was told to me by a coach, like, the training plan might be you might think you have a great training plan and you roll it out to the team. Well, if your athletes don't really go at it hard, it doesn't matter what the training plan is. It could be, hey, we got push-ups and body weight squats, and they attack it and they get better because of their attitude and how they do things. So, at some point in time, it's got to be something inside you driven intrinsically to want to do it better, to want to be really, really detailed at what you're doing versus what's on the card of the lift or what the plays are for that week. You got to do something to, study it better, watch someone do it, in front of you. For me, I was pretty good at watching someone do it and mimicking it the right way. Maybe other people need to rep it more and not see it as much. Just finding out how you do things that click with you the best, and not just going through it just to say you did it, I guess.
From the same aspect about, routines, there's got to be that deer in headlights moment for your rookies or the guys the first time that they're on that field, and it's, in that stadium, and you see it where now, again, it's no longer the physical that's limiting you, it's that psychological and handling the pressure of that moment. Some of our members, they work at big institutions as well, where their incoming athletes have, big moments too. What has been something that you have tried to help the routine and help understand and get them prepared for, when that moment occurs and how to handle it?
Coach Carroll and his staff do a great job of pushing that don't make it up, without quite the right words there.
Yeah.
Because that when you try, like Coach Carroll does a great job of explaining, like, if you do it how you've been doing it in practice, it's gonna work. And he does a great job of showing the film on a weekly basis. Hey, here's plays we ran either this week. It might be a play they ran in training camp that was executed in the game. Giving guys the confidence that you don't have to do more than what you're capable of doing. What you know how to do and how you do it is why you're here. And that's something I think that helps guys maybe relax in the moment. When you try to make a play, how many times does that actually happen? When a guy steps up to home plate, and he's telling himself, I'm going to hit a home run. How many times does that happen versus just having a clear head and trusting your technique and things, and doing it that way. So fortunately for me, we have a great coaching staff that uses different ways to reiterate that to the players, that they don't have to make things up, that, how they do things at practice are going to be good enough. So, yeah.
You talked about, your coaching staff, and you also talked about how, longevity at places can help you. What would be, again, a 10,000-foot view, detached perspective of any of our listeners out there that find themselves in a situation when they've been around a coaching staff, 5, 6, 7, multiple of years? How can you continue to honor your past while, working with the future, and in the present? Because, a Brad Stevens quote that I heard was, your culture is not just what happened in the past, it's a living, breathing thing within the organization. And how do you continue to honor things that happened before with what's happening now and paying homage to the future? What a piece of advice would you give to any of our members that have been around and in the same place, of how they can continue to do something like that?
Well, I mean, first of all, if you've been fortunate to be, at a team, at a school for a long time, like, number one, count your blessings. Because longevity and what we do, I think that's the ultimate goal. You're going to forget about the big games and things like that, but like, if you are fortunate to be in a place for a long time, it means, number one, you must be doing something right, coaching wise, creating relationship wise. But it is hard to sustain success. It's really hard. Like, the first couple of years of a new regime, at a team, at a business, everybody's in the fight, you're grinding, you have success, and it's human nature to maybe relax a little bit. And if you look at teams that have, maybe done a turnaround job and they get success, it's the next few years. Do they continue to rise? Do they level off? Do they fall? So I think it's very important to have, some tenets of your organization. Coach Carroll does an amazing job of that on a very frequent basis, of reminding our team what our, core values are. He shows film of players in the past that, nowadays some of our guys were, in elementary school when the Legion of Boom players were doing their thing, and reminds them that now it's, you are these guys now. It's been done in the past. What we preached and coached to those guys is what we're coaching to you. Bringing former players in, to deliver that message, to, get a little different tone from someone other than the head coach always helps. Just connecting the past, to let people know that what you've done has worked, continue to believe in the process. I think those are things that I see, that I have seen, not only here in Seattle, but at Iowa. They do a great job of doing that, bringing in former players for different things, to connect the dots to the history of the program, to remind guys of why there's been consistency and success. I think those things go a long ways.
And slightly switching gears, but sticking with the notion of connecting and having relationships. A lot of our listeners out there that they're, the transfer portal doesn't matter, football, basketball. I mean, I work with the track and field throwers, and just today he was getting ready to leave with the head coach to go to a JUCO to go. And again, transferring's everywhere. So, being in the NFL, you work with people that they come and go a lot, right? And they have different, they've been at different places, and whether they come in mid-season or before the season starts, my question to you, for our listeners out there that may be having bits and pieces come trickling in, how do you, one, connect with those athletes to get them to trust you, especially if there's been so much change in their life? And two, how do you help develop, teamwork and camaraderie, again, in your opinion, based off of any of that you've seen, dealing with free agency and the business that is the NFL?
I mean, for me, I want any player that comes into our weight room, I want that to be the best professional experience that they have. I want them to understand that we as a staff know what we're doing. I want to outperform any place that they've been before, so that whether they play with us for 10 years or 10 minutes, wherever they go next, they know that they've had the best experience training wise that they're going to have in the NFL. And, in the college, I can only imagine how it probably has changed some things. But on the flip side, strength and conditioning, can be the consistent part of what they do during their career. I was fortunate to be a part of a staff that was retained, and the players appreciate having some type of consistency. Like any type, and when a coaching change happens, it's crazy. Players don't know what's going to go on. Am I going to keep playing? Am I going to change positions? The coach that recruited me is gone, so on and so forth. But some type of consistency in their lives goes a long way. And a lot of times it's us in the weight room, or on the field prepping them, doing stuff that gives them that consistency in what they want. And, at the time, they might not understand the discipline and accountability side of it, especially with maybe some of the recruiting that goes on, that kids want to be felt a certain way. Like, you need some type of accountability and discipline in your life to succeed. And I think that there's a right way to do that in what we do as well.
Changing gears, and one of the last questions to wrap up here, just kind of a philosophical question for you. You said it. You started playing football in 1999 at Iowa, and then still coaching to 2022. So you've seen, again, a paradigm change in strength and conditioning, and I can only imagine, again, where everything used to be squat, bench, dead, and Olympic lifting, or again, you're going to have a different perspective. What's been the good, the bad, the ugly of what you've seen for the field of strength and conditioning? And then if you could, again, hypothesize, and let's, you're a father, where would you, if your son decides to follow in your footsteps because you followed in your father's footsteps, where would you project it, and where would you like to see it go in the next 10, 15, 20 years? Again, just in your opinion.
It's interesting that you bring up that last part, because that's one thing I always am asking other coaches, like, where's our field going? Like, what's going to be the next thing to make it keep growing? But it's interesting when you ask coaches of different experience, like, it's a cycle, like things that were old are new again, things that were new 5 years ago, people aren't doing. So I think I touched on it earlier, like there's things that in what we do, physically preparing athletes, that have to be present. You're never gonna, you can't substitute sprinting with jogging on a treadmill. Like, it doesn't matter what study somebody comes up with, like trust me, there's some guys that I've worked with that they're always trying to find a way to substitute the hard work and consistency of training. So those things are never going to go away. I feel extremely fortunate in my experience as a player at Iowa. Chris Doyle means everything to me. We were doing things, in 1999 that people are just now discovering, bar speed and measuring bar speed was like something I did when I was 18. And I've coached with coaches now that have never heard of it. And to me, that's embarrassing for our field. So some of the good stuff that I see in our field is people experimenting. I think using technology, measuring bar speed, however you do it, using force plates and GPS, like those things can really narrow your focus and specificity with athletes. You don't have to be just kind of using a shotgun approach with some guys. You can get really specific using some of those metrics. So I think those have been valuable, helping you achieve goals without having to be stuck using the same exercise. I love the research that people have done with trap bar jumps versus hang cleans and things like that. Like you can get more going faster, things like that. I've seen I see the benefit of, I know you and other coaches use a 1x20 method. Like there's a huge benefit of general preparation and building functional hypertrophy in young athletes. You have to continue to build that functional hypertrophy with pro athletes. Like we can't let these guys lose muscle mass in a long season. Like that has to be part of it for them to stay lean, to stay strong and healthy. For me, I'm always going to revert to some type of vertical integration and conjugate training. Like you just cover all the bases, and there's a lot of different ways for you to work that, no matter what equipment you have, no matter what coaches you have available. I think those two kind of methodologies really, really work hand in hand in most any scenario. The bad stuff, I don't know. Like, I think people do things just because they want to be seen. It's not about us. Like if you're a strength coach, it's not about you. You're not on the field making the plays. You're not making the calls to that make the plays on the field. Like you are a support staff member and you're a vital member of that, but it's not about you, no matter how much you think it is. And ultimately it's just, the reason that I enjoy being a strength coach is that I enjoy the process. Like that meant the world to me. Like, being a strength coach and being a former football player, like football has taken me all over the world, essentially, travel wise, job wise. I've met so many great people. And, those are the things that I want the athletes that I coach to experience because of, where I've been in my experience, like to help them understand, what a professional sport or playing a college sport can do for you in your life. So, yeah, that's a big question. So hopefully I hit some of those things.
Yeah, no, and I mean that's one of the questions that I feel too. Like you talk about the pendulum and what's going to be
Yeah.
the thing. And I mean, for me, I wonder, are we going to get too technology driven? Are we going to
Yes.
go too far? And now coaches are going to, they're going to revert back to not even wanting to do it and using very little of it because too many coaches are getting to be data driven, not data informed, right? Like just
Yeah.
use it as a tool in your tool belt. But again, you said it earlier, right? Like a great program is a great program when it's the athletes buy into it, and it might not necessarily be the most perfectly designed program. I know that doesn't exist, and we're all searching for it. But getting your athletes to buy in, and how does that occur? With relationships, right? And yes, you can use the technology, but that's something that I'm going to be curious to see. Like, how does it evolve with respect to me? I think the field is going to evolve where we'll at least see more and more of this at high school and lower colleges where people are making, money that they can actually work and be serviceable at those places. And then I do think that there's going to be some reversion back to, okay, we don't need, technology on every single thing. How can we, work with our athletes, person to person? No, I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today. Is there any way, any of our members, if they want to follow you in your journey on, any social medias that you want to recommend, or if not, just.
I mean, my social media is going to be me and my family. I don't post anything training wise. I don't post anything that's going to really entertain you. So they should just follow you. Because you're a lot more entertaining than I would be. But yeah,
Oh man.
I appreciate it. I love what you guys are doing. I hope we can do it again sometime.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Best of luck the rest of the season. Obviously a fan of seeing former Hawks do what they do. So, Noah and Austin, definitely rooting for you guys out west. And you're ever in Baltimore, man, reach out.
Yeah, man, I appreciate it. Good luck with everything.
Yeah, talk to you later.
Congratulations on making it to the end of the video. Why don't you celebrate by watching more videos just like it? You can also help us on our quest to placate the algorithm gods by liking, sharing, subscribing, and commenting. Thank you.